Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. 52 weeks out from the general election. Very exciting week, and we're here to talk this week with Senator Kurt Schaefer, Senator from Columbia, candidate for Attorney General.
Yep.
And the
absolutely.
Budget Chairman in the State Senate. Welcome back.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
And it's 52 weeks out. We're like 100 days out from the Iowa caucuses, give or take. And you were at the presidential debate in Colorado this week. Tell us what you saw.
I was, and I didn't know what to expect, but it was fantastic. It was absolutely fascinating. And as someone who's tried a lot of cases, been in a courtroom, and used to feeling that tension and that drama, when you're there in person, that's what you feel. And so you're watching not just the person that's answering the question, but you're watching everybody else. It was great. Absolutely loved it.
So who won the debate?
I think it's interesting because several I did not think did well. Several did not do well. I thought that Chris Christie and Carly Fiorina, I thought, did pretty well. I thought that Trump and Carson kind of held their own, but no bold moves. But I thought the real winners were Cruz and Rubio.
So what was it like watching Trump? Was he high energy?
I actually had to send a picture to my wife and kids because, it's interesting when the camera's not focused on the other candidates, they're kind of leaning against the podium or they're taking notes. He stands there perfectly rigid, that look on his face. And it's exactly like you see on skits on Saturday Night Live and things like that. It's just really funny. And then, but he was fantastic. I thought he did a good job, but a little more reserved than I think he'd been in the previous one.
And so the reason that 14 million people watched was him. Were the moderators as bad as they looked on TV?
It was unbelievable. Absolutely. And you heard it, and I don't think probably the coverage exposed it as much as being there, but the booing of the crowd was unprecedented, and it was so loud, and it was so, it overtook everything. It was unbelievable.
As someone that's moderated debates, that is like the Rocky Horror Picture Show for somebody that's moderated a debate. It's like that's as bad as it could ever get, right, when that happens.
It was terrible. And because, it really dominated rather than the candidates. And the thing is, again, having, tried a lot of cases and dealt with leading questions, the accusatory nature and the leading nature of the questions. And a leading question is a question that implies the answer in the question. So, in other words, for Donald Trump, rather than are you a comic book character, it's kind of you are a comic book character, aren't you? And that's the difference between open-ended and even the open-ended nature of that question is offensive, but the leading nature of it makes it even worse.
So there's a guy with a local tie to Missouri, Jeff Rose, running the Ted Cruz campaign. How did Cruz do?
I thought Cruz did great. And the interesting thing about that kind of biasness in the media is it was building, and everybody saw it from the beginning, and it was really Cruz who had been taking some notes. And then when it came back to him, he just knocked off about 4 or 5 things of insults to the other candidates and then said, this isn't a cage match. This is a presidential debate. And that's what really sparked that crowd to get involved and say, yeah, okay, we've been seeing it. I'm glad you acknowledged it. And after that, when these types of questions came, it was just overriding boos and a lot of unhappiness with those
Jeff Rode knows
moderators.
the voters that Ted Cruz is going for, doesn't he? He knows who they are and what they want to hear.
Yeah, and I thought that Cruz really, because it's the elephant in the room. It's like, okay, who's going to acknowledge this? And Christie did a little bit, and Trump did at the beginning too, but I thought it was really Cruz who wrapped it all up and threw it out there.
So he said it was going to be a disaster.
Yeah, and it was.
Rubio, how did he do? He's getting, I believe in the process, Speaker Richardson's going to run his campaign in the state. There's a groundswell coming for Rubio. How did he do at the debate? In Missouri, that is.
I thought of everyone, he and Cruz, I think, did the best, but Rubio, I think, really was shining. He also pushed back against the moderators on some of those questions about his personal finances and things like that. And I thought the other thing that he did a very nice job of is the moderators did not seem to do their homework. So they were asking things, that really weren't true, and the candidates, and especially Rubio, I thought did a great job saying, well, that's just not true, and let me tell you why. And it made the moderators look bad. It made him look good, The other thing that he did, and Christie did a little bit, but Rubio did a great job, and that was saying, look, you're trying to get all of us to fight amongst each other. And Rubio specifically said, I'm not running against everyone else on this stage. I'm running against Hillary Clinton. And when he said that, I thought he really knocked it out of the park.
He had a quote that I thought was interesting that kind of applies to you, and he said, they asked him about super PACs, and he said the liberal Democrats have a super PAC. It's called the mainstream media.
Right.
The mainstream media isn't your biggest fan. The liberals have called you the scariest person in Missouri to liberals. Does your opponent, Josh Hawley, have a super PAC in the Post and the Star and the Tribune? Just
like in that presidential election where you could really see those moderators, the mainstream media, trying to pick who the Republican they wanted to put out there from that group of 10. I'm seeing that now in the state of Missouri. You're absolutely right. There's no doubt about it. Is the Kansas City Star, the Post-Dispatch, Columbia Tribune.
They're not fans.
Well, and they're not going to vote for Republicans. But what they're going to do is try and pick the Republican that they want out there, who is going to be the Republican that they think their Democrat candidate is going to beat. And I'm seeing that right now. And look, I'm the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I cut $1 billion out of the state budget. Now, I will point out that we increased spending on K through 12 and higher ed at the same time to provide some relief for Missouri families and the public school system. But they're going to highlight those things, and I've got an opponent that has never done anything. And so when when you've got a record, and I'll stand on my record all day long, and you got somebody that's a blank slate, the liberal media, just as Rubio pointed out, they're going to take that and they're going to use it to try and put the Republican candidate out there that they want, and that's going to be the weakest Republican candidate, because let's face it, they want to see the Democrat get elected.
Just like with John McCain thought he had a bunch of friends in the mainstream media, and he did, as long as he's bashing Republicans. But when he came down running against Obama, he didn't have any of those friends left. They were on the other side.
Right, and I think if you're naive enough to think, being a Republican candidate, well, this institution, whether it's the Kansas City Star or the Post-Dispatch, which has always been on the same point, on the same page for decades, I'm the guy that's going to turn them around. I mean, to believe that, you'd have to be very naive. Everyone knows where they're going. Everyone knows what their agenda is, and you just deal with it.
So you mentioned your record. Your district in the state senate encompasses University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. Increasing spending for higher education includes increasing spending for Mizzou. There's just been one turmoil after another. I mean, it's getting to the point where curators looking bad, the governor's looking bad. How do they kind of organize their house and move forward?
I think that's a really good question. I think there'll be a lot of discussion that coming up. And obviously, that's a sensitive question for being the senator who represents the University of Missouri, the flagship council in Columbia. But here's the thing. What I see right now, and whether it's getting engaged with Planned Parenthood activities or whether it's some of the financial things we're seeing, some of the increasing tuition, some of the unaccountability on bloated administration, which is something we're going to get into in this session, the University of Missouri, in my opinion, is not the institution, the great institution that it was when I graduated from there in 1990. And so if I can do my part to get them back on track, that's what I'm going to do.
So walk me through this session. What do you see happening? Not just with Mizzou, but with what's going to be the focus of this session?
Obviously it's going to be an election year, so that always dominates what comes up to a certain extent. And not only what comes up, but what makes it through. But I think there are some bigger themes. I think some of the things we've seen out of the U.S. Supreme Court recently, a lot of religious liberty issues are going to be at the forefront because, as I've been saying now for months, so the Supreme Court issued their decision, a couple of decisions which have really defined religious liberty on one end, but where the rubber meets the road and what that means for real Americans and Missourians and the religious freedoms, that all still has to shake out. So that's what you're going to see in the legislature. Where is that line? I think we're going to see that. I think also the big issue is going to be transparency. And whether it's transparency at the University of Missouri, whether it's transparency with municipal governments on tax issues, I think transparency is going to be a big theme of this coming session.
Into session, will the University of Missouri be in the abortion business?
They shouldn't ever have gotten in the abortion business. We did find out that really under the radar, they did get in that business. I'm going to do everything I can to get them out of it because they never should have gotten into it. We have multiple state laws that say as a public institution they're not supposed to be in it. And it damages the university. When the university takes sides and gets into an issue like that, it damages. I think that's further evidence that it's not the great institution that it once was.
Last topic, how's the campaign going? Running for Attorney General. You got 2 Democrat opponents in the primary, 1 Republican in your primary. How's things going getting around the state? Are you enjoying it?
I love it. I love it. And for 5 months now, I've been on the road. And you go and sometimes you meet with a group of 5 people and sometimes you meet with a group of 500 people. But I tell you what, I love delivering the message. And we need an Attorney General who is a prosecutor, somebody that knows how the criminal justice system works. I'm a former special assistant U.S. attorney, former assistant attorney general. I've tried those cases, including death penalty cases. That's the bare minimum that you got to have. And really, in the Republican primary, I'm the only one that has that experience. And really, on the Democrat side, there's not much experience either.
So going well?
Yeah, it's going,
fundraising going well?
Yeah, it's all going great. And on the fundraising aspect, the wide support that we've seen throughout the state of Missouri, from every corner of the state of Missouri, has been overwhelming. And when you get that kind of positive reinforcement, that's exactly what you want to see in a campaign because it energizes you. And so I think it's just going fantastic.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Missouri Politics. Hope to see you as those 52 weeks come down. We hope you'll be back.
Great. Thank you very much for having me on, Scott. Good to see you.
And we'll be right back with this week's leading economic indicators and our opinion maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our opinion maker panel, including a couple first-time guests. David Sweeney, attorney with Lathrop and Gage, former general counsel to the Board of Aldermen. A very topical time. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Representative Mike Colona, often invited, first time accepted. Glad to have the representative on. I assume it'll be tough to get opinions out of you today.
It may be, Scott. It may be. It's early.
Jack Spooner, back with attorney here in St. Louis, former candidate and the finance chair of the Missouri Republican Party.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And had an event with Jack Clark. So, I mean, I think that's saved the biggest for last. And Representative Caleb Rowden's been on the show before, Columbia, running for state senate. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start with you. First topic this week is ethics reform. Been discussed many, many years now in all different forms. It's hard to define it, but you're talking about a plan you're going to put forward. You may be the lead person in the House on this issue. What do you think is an effective ethics reform plan?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with kind of the public perception and what do we need to do to help restore the trust that I think has been lost between our voters and members of the General Assembly. And so, we've been talking over the summer with House leadership, Senate leadership. I think one of the goals is to come to the table with a comprehensive package that the Senate and the House can agree on. Obviously, there was some tension there last year, which is the reason why it didn't happen. But we're going to take a look at, banning lobbyist gifts, taking a look at the revolving door.
The revolving door means that you can't leave the legislature and
immediately go into lobbying. Yeah, you need to take a cooling off period so that there's not any undue influence there. And then take a look at legislators that maybe take some of their dollars from campaign committees and use that in other forms. We're going to take a look at how that plays out. And again, it's one of those things that at the end of the day, it's about the public perception, making sure that when people look at our process, that they're proud of what they see.
Representative Colona, we've talked before. You've been an outspoken critic of this is much ado about nothing, and you're changing very little. Give us the cliff notes of what your opinion's been on the proposals that have been brought up in the past.
Sure, but I like to remind people that I'm sorry, a steak dinner is not going to buy my vote, plain and simple. We have a few issues when it comes to trust in the General Assembly, and to be quite frank, most of those trust issues stem from money and politics. I think everybody has read the Post-Dispatch and has seen that I'm the #1 lobbyist gift taker in the entire General Assembly. If you look at the records, if you look at my tenure in the General Assembly from 2008 to today, my numbers have stayed consistent. What has changed is people have gotten craftier at the games that they play. For example, if you want to give me some baseball tickets, hey, Mike, you want to go to the game? Oh, Scott, I can't go to the game, but how much are those tickets? Well, those tickets are $50 a piece. Tell you what, give me the tickets, and then I'm going to write you a check for $50 out of my campaign account. By the way, I got an event next week. Can I have $100 to put into my campaign account? So what we're doing today is money laundering.
Transparency a little bit?
There is no transparency when it comes to that type of gift laundering. What works in politics is full disclosure and transparency. That's what we have today when it comes to gift giving, when it comes to trip giving, when it comes to giving money in campaigns. The real issues, some of the issues I think that drive some of these lobbyist expenditures that you see on reports, you can tie back to what we actually pay members of the General Assembly. If you get somebody, say, Caleb's age, mid-30s, with a family and kids, you pay them $34,000 a year. You tell them they got to have 2 homes, one at the state capitol, one in Kansas City. You tell them they have to be away from their job for 6 months. Well, it's a little hard to go out to dinner on a Monday night on your $34,000 salary while you're in Jeff City. So I think when you take a look at some of these
We're just telling it like it is, aren't you? You're just dropping it down. Raise their pay and the gifts.
It's reality. I mean, we can go out there and say, look at us. We're going to do these great ethics reforms. We're going to ban gifts. And what are we going to do? Are we going to raise salaries? No. Are we going to raise per diems? No. We are going to make the pool of candidates who can come down and serve the public, the citizen legislator that we want, we're going to make that pool of folks even smaller than it is today. Why? Just so we can go out there and say, look at the neat, cool things we did for ethics reform.
Isn't that a good point, though? You could pass an ethics reform bill every week of session, and generally people think politicians are corrupt.
They do think that, but it also, in appearances and perception is important. And I think Governor Nixon's statements this week are key, and that bipartisanship come in. Because citizens look at this, and they see these dinners, they see them being held at country clubs, and there may be transparency, but still the appearance stinks. And I think if we can clean that up in any way, it helps all parties involved.
Jack Spooner, you're involved with the Missouri Republican Party, and you raise money. It seems like one issue that's not talked about as much that makes really good common sense is a ban on fundraising during session. What's your take on the whole issue?
Well, the whole issue is, I just listened to all this, and this is what's wrong with government. This is why we're broken. We want to go on the broken wheel and do what these guys are telling us to do without fixing the wheel first. You got to go back and fix government. You've got to start with complete and absolute transparency on all political related expenditures from top to bottom. You've got to take our legislator. Our legislature has to shrink. You got to go with 90 or so reps. You got to go with 28 or so senators. You got to shorten the session. I call it a month and a day, by 1 month and 1 day each week. Between these 2 reps, they put in maybe 15 bills each session. Now times that by over 100, and you wonder why nothing gets done? You've got to let the group concentrate on what they need to concentrate on, and you have to change the term limits to help out the legislators. You go with 12-year term limits, 2 6-year terms in the Senate. You go with 4 3-year terms in the House, so they're not always worrying about getting reelected. And you take these term limits and apply term limits from dog catcher on up. We have a mayor in the city of St. Louis that's been there for almost 2 decades. And when you do that, you build cobwebs. All these issues have to be fixed first. Once you get these issues in line, we can start moving more efficiently. They can go to Jeff City and they can get things done. I don't need to hear bills about whether we should have attorneys not show their IDs when they go into the courthouse. We need to be working on
plastic bags, maybe.
We need to work on more important things. So my take is we got to blow it up and do it all over.
Some folks feel like the citizenry's safer when they don't get things done.
No,
many folks don't want things done. One thing, Caleb, I would ask you, you're in the legislature. What about the ban on in-session fundraising? Whether or not you think you should be able to tell a company who they can hire, whether or not you think there's a term limit, contribution limits, or stake dinner change somebody, I think there's reasonable debate on both sides. But banning fundraising during session seems like a very reasonable move that could be made that actually might have some practical effect.
Yeah, I think, there's certainly, first of all, I think doing it via statute through the research we've done is unconstitutional for a couple of reasons. But, I think there is again, it goes back to perception. It goes back when my constituents and when anyone's constituents look at the process, can they be pleased with that? Can they trust that? There is certainly the possibility with fundraising during session that there's some overlap that looks suspect. I don't think it usually is, but the perception's there, no question about it.
The term is non-suspect. You're telling Joe Q public that, well, we're going to protect the people that are in session by not allowing them to raise funds. while they're doing their job, it sounds like, well, we're trying to take care of the people in Jeff City. And when you're talking about
You're going to set up a climate where you limit things that could be construed poorly.
You're violating their First Amendment right. You can't tell somebody, a donor, the Supreme Court's given us.
No, you could tell a legislator, don't take contributions during session. You put that in the House rules if you wanted to.
So what if the
you can put it
corporation wants to write a check?
Is that not something you could? Is that not something even you
No.
could sign on to?
Look, here's the deal, okay? And I want to make sure that your viewers grasp the concept. I agree with just about everything that Mr. Spooner said, but what I'm surprised is that he doesn't remember that we have term limits. They're called elections. And to artificially impose some random deadline on how long you can serve the public, I think is ridiculous.
Well, it's not arbitrary. It's the government enforcing.
It's ridiculous. And I don't understand why true conservatives like that idea. And it makes me think that perhaps all those rumors and conspiracy theories that we heard a long time ago about the only way Republicans could take over the General Assembly is to kick out the Democrats that have been there forever. So let's have a three-pronged approach.
Has that really been the case across the nation?
Prong number two, monetary. Well, there was that red state project,
Sure.
And we had a couple prongs there. I think
and there's
term
not a blue
limits
state
and
project and a green state project.
but
and the
we
yellow
don't have the
We're
deep
wasting our
pockets
time.
that the red
Let's
state
talk
folks
about
have.
a blue and yellow state project, David Sweeney, which is the stadium issue
It is.
that's being before the Board of Aldermen right now. Where is that before the Board of Aldermen? And give me the prediction. Do they build a stadium in St. Louis?
Well, I think there's a bill getting introduced today with financing, which will be key. There was a ballot to put it on the ballot by my Alderwoman, Megan Green, and Representative Colona's as well. I don't know how soon that will get a hearing. I think the bill being introduced today by Jack Coder and Tamika Hubbard will get a hearing quickly. I think ultimately it'll be up to the NFL. I think all pieces will be lined up from the city, from the state, and ultimately it'll be up to the owners of the NFL if we have a team or not. But I think we'll do our part.
Caleb Rowden, does the state legislature block this?
I certainly think what is happening right now and the perception of how Governor Nixon has just kind of forced this through the process is not one that has been greeted warmly in Jefferson City. I think the opinion of the general constituency across the state of Missouri would be, if you polled them overwhelmingly, it would be that we don't want to use public dollars to build a stadium. We're okay with I'm a fan of the Rams. The owner of the Rams lives in my town, so I get that. I understand the realities of it, but I think
that's not going to be popular, I don't think. Are you sure it's just not people dressing up as Halloween?
But the reality is, I think for us as the state reps for 35,000 people in outstate Missouri, in many cases, you got to represent your people, and you got to make sure that their voices are being heard throughout that process. And it doesn't mean that we have to be careful that we're not doing things that endanger the credit of the state and some of those things. You have to be realistic and pragmatic about how we go through this process. But certainly the way that it has happened up until this point is not something that will warm us up to eventually appropriating those dollars.
I'd like to ask about when you knock doors at his home. That'd be an interesting story. Jack Spooner, does this funding bill go through the Board of Aldermen, and is there a stadium built on the riverfront?
Well, I think the state needs to realize that this is the heartbeat. This is the heart of the state. This is the engine that drives the state. And if you want to be relevant in today's society, you have to have a football team. So what it comes down to is how are we going to handle oversight on allowing government
Do
to
you
help?
believe it is a economic development recruitment factor to have an NFL team in St. Louis?
Yes, it is, absolutely. And have a newspaper.
That was part of
Yes.
Dave Spence' point.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so there
yeah.
are ancillary benefits that don't show up on that spreadsheet.
You just can't give corporations windfalls through subsidies. They have to have ties so it pays back to the community, and I think a stadium would do that.
Michael, developing a riverfront in every city that's done, it's been very expensive and usually takes a collaborative effort. Is there another way to develop that riverfront property without something like this?
I don't know, but what really frustrates me are some of the comments that the gentleman from Boone County made. And there are a lot of folks in both parties that agree with his comments. But I think what that demonstrates is political posturing, a lack of insight, and really just a little bit more political grandstanding. And here's the reason why.
There is opposition to the stadium
There is
proposal.
opposition.
That is
okay?
legitimate.
There seems to be this idea in the General Assembly with the majority of folks that whatever Governor Nixon does is bad. And because Governor Nixon is doing it, we're going to take a position that says we don't like it, all right? The plain and simple fact is, come down to my district, go down to my riverfront, take a look at what's there right now. You ask the folks that built the last stadium that we had whether or not that was a good investment. The folks that worked there for 2, 3, 5 years building that facility. You ask the folks that come down to that facility now that use it as a convention center whether or not it was a good investment. You take a look at the revenue that the city of St. Louis makes off of it. You take a look at something that you can't quantify, and that's the exposure that not just the city of St. Louis, not just the metropolitan area, but the state of Missouri gets when the blimp is overhead filming an NFL game.
What I love about you is just because it's popular doesn't mean it's grandstanding. Give me the prediction. Is there a stadium built on the riverfront?
And it's also a lack of leadership. And I applaud Governor Nixon, I applaud Mayor Slay for stepping forward and saying this is what leaders do.
People want Nixon to lead, he's led.
Then where's the lack of leadership if it isn't with those two?
Well, I'll tell you,
Jack.
I'll tell you.
No,
you know
no,
what?
you're politicizing
Our
the
House
stadium.
leadership last year was great on this issue.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Is the stadium get built?
I hope it gets built.
Hope so. Last topic, big debate. Jack Spooner, we heard the senator who was in attendance in Colorado. Who did you think won the debate, and who is the person that comes out of the primaries?
Well, I thought Rubio really did the best. The rest of them, I thought Bush again hurt his position, and I'm really surprised that he's as low as he is, and I don't see him being able to rehabilitate himself. So you're going to be left with Cruz did a nice job too. So it's starting to shape up. There's other things going, but I would probably say I enjoyed Rubio the most.
Representative Colona, it seemed interesting that that people said Bush's last name would hurt him. It seems like Bush being a poor campaigner is hurting him.
I would agree, and what Jack just said, I'm thinking to myself, scary. Wait a minute, what about that guy from Ohio? He sounded pretty sane. and what is actually frustrating for me
is sane on the vice president level.
Jeb Bush is a moderate on a lot of things, and I think a Bush-Hillary battle down the road would be really good for the country.
David Sweeney, who do you want to see? I mean, you're a Democrat.
Who do I want to see? Oh, I want to see Trump.
Who do you not want to see?
Rubio. Bush, I don't count him out at all. I mean, he's got a lot of money, and I think he's going to come back up. I think Carson starts dropping.
He just looks uncomfortable.
He does.
Jeb Bush just doesn't look like he's having a good time doing this.
I'm shocked that he was a governor of a state, that he's a Bush. I mean, it's amazing. I agree with you, but I think...
Well, if his super PAC hangs in, he'll hang in. But if
The other that's a little weird. One Bush son had drug issues and DWI stuff, and he was likable. And one Jeb Bush does not look like he enjoys doing this.
I think how politics has changed a little bit. Jeb Bush would have been a great presidential nominee 20 years ago. But the idea of being it's a solutions-oriented guy, but now the charisma element of a Marco Rubio or a Ted Cruz or even a Carly Fiorina, her ability to answer questions on her feet is really important. I think, Rubio is really doing some great things. I applaud the job Jeff Rowe's done with Ted Cruz. He's running a heck of a race.
And
so
isn't
far.
Trump doing a great service to Rubio? 14 million people don't watch that debate without Donald Trump.
Yeah, no question about it.
Quick prediction, we have 10 seconds left. Who wins the primaries?
There's no way. It's just too
Marco
complicated.
Rubio.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio, quick prediction. Trump.
Rubio.
So we'll leave it there. I think next week we'll talk a little Rubio. I think there'll be a big announcement in Missouri from support he has. And we'll leave it there until next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.